give us a heads up, Chair Ferricks, when you're ready. We'll start that.
Sure. Yeah, ready. I'm ready whenever you are.
Okay, confirming that the streaming has begun.
Great. Thanks so much. Well, good morning, everyone. It is surprisingly already June 18th. This is the June 18th meeting of the SACOG Board of Directors. We are, of course, having a remote meeting again this month, and I just wanted to just kick off the meeting this morning with the Pledge of Allegiance. If we could have, let's see, who do I spy in my 25 squares? If we could have directors soon lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, I'd appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, Chair Ferricks. If you all want to rise where you're at, hand over heart. Ready, pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America,
to the republic
for
for which it stands, one nation under
under
God,
God,
indivisible, with
indivisible,
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. If we could get a roll call, Lynette, please.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Just a reminder that this meeting is being recorded and live audio streamed on our website. Board members, we ask that if you are not speaking, if you could please make sure that you mute your device so that we don't have feedback into the meeting. And then board members, you're also welcome to raise your hand using that feature through Zoom. And we will make sure that you're able to make any comments that you'd like. And for our board members who are joining us by telephone this morning, you can press *9 to make a comment. Thank you. I'll go ahead and take roll. Director Allard.
Here.
Baldwin.
Here.
Douglas.
Present.
Flores. I don't see him. Absent. Frost.
Here.
Gallardo.
Here.
Gore.
Here.
Harris.
Here.
Jankovich.
Here.
Jennings.
Here.
Joyner.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Kozlowski.
Here.
Leahy.
Here.
Lozano. Absent. New.
Here.
Onderko.
Here.
Peters. I'll let the record show that she's here. Sander.
Here.
Zaragoza. Absent. Saylor.
Here.
Chenier. Absent. Slowey.
Here.
Oakley.
Here.
Stallard.
Here.
Noon.
Here.
Hicksa.
Here.
Veerkamp.
Here.
West.
Here.
Vice Chair Samayoa.
Present.
Chair Frericks.
Here.
And ex officio member Takar.
Here.
Thank you. And I'll also let the record show that it looks like Director Flores is joining us now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. That's establishing quorum is half the battle in these meetings these days. We're gonna see, can we get that muted, please? Thank you. So we'll move along now to public communications. This is a time, of course, for anyone who wishes to address the board on an item that is not appear elsewhere on the agenda. Lynette, did we receive any comments from the public via email, or is there a member of the public participating by phone that wishes to make a comment?
Yes, Chair Frericks, we have 2 members of the public who would like to make public comments on a receive and file item, item number 14, which is the update on the Sacramento Region Parks and Trails Strategic Plan, Development Plan. So Renee is going to pull each of those folks into the meeting, or we'll just take one moment.
Thank you.
Hi, Eric. Are you live to make your public comment? Good morning, Eric. Are you live to make your public comment?
Yes, I am.
All right, go ahead. Hi.
I want to comment on item number 14 of the agenda. This is a receive and file item, so the clerk suggested I comment on it here. The Sacramento Regional Parks and Trails Strategic Development Plan has one deeply flawed item. This is the Del Rio Trail, which is currently under litigation. This project has been deliberately designed to permanently wreck a heritage railroad line eligible for listing on the National Registry of Historic Places. A court ruling is expected in August. I would like to follow and participate in the SACOG planning sessions this summer and help represent a growing segment of the heritage railroading community that feels the same way I do. I yield the remainder of my time. Go Zebra Train. Follow and participate in the SACOG planning sessions this summer and help represent a growing segment of the heritage railroading community that feels the same way I do. I yield the remainder of my time. Go.
All right, and it should just be a moment while Renee pulls in our second public comment.
Thank you, Lynette. I'm going to do that right now. Hi, Paul. Are you available to make your public comment? Paul, can you confirm if you are available to make your public comment?
I am available to make my public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. You are officially live and ready to make it.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Paul Hellman. I wish to make a few comments to this board today to encourage you to increase your focus on decisions that assist in the effort to combat climate change. The West Sacramento and Sacramento Mayor's Commission on Climate Change, a local effort, but one that is a role model for all communities to adopt. It is noteworthy to point out that this local commission is a national leader in the efforts to grapple with the serious, almost certain life-altering change in our global environment. The commission will produce its final report soon, and this report bears serious study, internalization, and adoption of its principles, findings, and solutions. The concepts of zero emission, electrification, active transportation, shared mobility, and overall equity are woven into the recommendations of the commission. Your role is to embrace these concepts and with the decisions you make, strive for optimal solutions, solutions that incorporate all these concepts and not suboptimal solutions that favor one to the detriment of another. An example of a climate change combating suboptimal solution is the funding of an active transportation trail project on a historic rail corridor connecting downtown Sacramento to Freeport. Being lost in this project are expensive to replace street crossings that will make the more optimal solution of shared mobility inclusion much more expensive to install. An existing rail corridor connecting residences, businesses, work sites, schools, libraries is a rare thing indeed. Where they exist, they deserve to provide the greatest benefit in the effort to combat climate change. The combination of shared mobility with active transportation is the glide path to an equitable future. Of course, what I'm talking about is the historic Walnut Grove branch line of the Southern Pacific Railroad, now being suboptimally consumed by the Del Rio Trail. I invite you to look at thezebratrain.org. One word, the Zebra Train, ZEBRA, zero emission bike and rail alternative. Embrace the zebra concept, optimize your solutions, and make one small step to save the planet. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for the public comments. So there are no more at this point, Lynette?
No.
Great, thank you very much. So we are now going to adjourn the SACOG Board of Directors and convene as the CVR SAFE Board of Directors. Lynette, could you please note for any record, any changes to the previous roll call? I think we've had a few directors join, and I also think Supervisor Wynn from San Joaquin County has also joined us.
Yes, thank you. We'll note the addition of directors Zaragoza and Lozano to our roll call. And also, as you said, Supervisor Wynn from San Joaquin and Councilmember Young from Tracy.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks. Good morning, everyone, for joining us. Appreciate that. So the SAFE agenda contains the following consent items. Number one, approve the minutes of the May 21st, 2020 SAFE Board meeting, as well as the approval of the final fiscal year 2020-2021 budget. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to comment on these items?
I don't see any public comments.
Okay, thank you. So do we have a motion to approve? Please raise your hand. I see a hand raised by Stallard, or maybe Young as well too. Thank you. So yeah, Councilmember Young, moved by Young, seconded by Stallard. Any questions, comments, or discussion on this item? I'm hearing and seeing none. All those in favor? Actually, we'll go to a roll call. Lynette, thank you.
Thank you. We'll try to do this quickly. Director Allard?
Yes.
Cabalden?
Yes.
I see a hand raised by Stallard.
Douglas?
Yes.
Yeah,
Flores?
by Young.
Yes.
Frost?
Aye.
Dialdo?
Yes.
Gore?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Jankovitz?
Yes.
Jennings?
Yes.
Joyner?
Yes.
Kennedy?
Aye.
Kozlowski?
Yes.
Leahy?
Yes.
Lozano?
Aye.
New?
Yes.
Onderko?
Yes.
Peters?
Yes.
Sander?
Aye.
Zaragoza? Director Zaragoza, can you indicate your vote? Oh, okay, I'll move on. Taylor?
Aye.
Janier?
Aye.
Chloe?
Aye.
Director Slowey, could you indicate your vote?
Aye.
Thank you. Oakley?
Yes.
Stallard?
Yes.
Thune?
Aye.
Pixa?
Yes.
Camp?
Aye.
West?
Yes.
Wynn?
Yes.
Young?
Yes.
Vice Chair Samayoa?
Yes.
And Chair Ferricks?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Great, thank you very much, everyone. So we are now hereby adjourn the SAFE Board of Directors meeting and reconvene as the SACOG Board of Directors. So let's see, we will now switch gears to the consent calendar. So staff has asked that item 3 be removed from the consent calendar and placed on the action calendar, and the remaining consent calendar items are intended to be approved in one motion. However, of course, anyone can remove an item for discussion. Do we have anybody that wishes to remove any of the other consent calendar items for discussion?
Sailor moves approval of the consent calendar, less item 3.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I will.
Sander seconds.
So we have a motion by Sailor, a second by
Kozlowski.
Sander, or Kozlowski. We have lots of seconds. That's good. But Lynette, I have to go to public comment though first, very quickly. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to remove an item for public comment?
Chair Ferricks, I don't see any public comments.
Great, thank you very much. So we have a motion and a second. And any other questions, comments, or discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Great, we will go now to roll call, please.
Thank you. Director Allard,
Yes.
Cabalden, Director Cabalden.
Great, thank you very much. So we have a motion and a second. Any other questions, comments, or discussion? If somebody's now they're watching the video along with
Right. Cabalden. Any of our board members, if you could pause the video or stop the video, that would be appreciated. Sorry, we'll go back to roll call. Director Cabalden, your vote was aye, is that correct?
I think so. I'm hearing the meetings like 4 times over with echoes, so I'm not sure what we're on, but if it's a consent calendar, then yes, I'm an aye.
Yes, thank you. It is consent calendar. Director Douglas, can you indicate your vote?
Aye.
Flores? Director Flores? Okay, moving on. Gallardo?
Calendar, then yes.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Gore?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Jankovich? Okay, moving on. Jennings?
Yes.
Joyner?
Yes.
Kennedy?
Aye.
Kozlowski?
Yes.
Leahy?
Yes.
Lozano?
Aye.
New?
Aye.
Onderko?
Yes.
Peters? I see her raised hand on the for the record as aye. Sander?
Aye.
Saragosa? Saragosa's logging back in. He's having technical issues. Director Saylor?
Aye.
Chenier?
Aye.
Slowey?
Aye. Sorry.
Thank you. Spokley?
Yes.
Stallard?
Yes.
Soon?
Aye.
Tixa?
Yes.
Veerkamp?
Aye.
West?
Yes.
Vice Chair Samayoa?
Yes.
And Chair Ferricks?
aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you very much, everyone. So now we're going to hear.
Director is a yes. Director Flores is a yes. Sorry.
Great. Thank you very much, Director Flores. And Director Jankovich was on mute as well. And let me just see if I don't know if he's still there. Okay, but yeah. So thank you very much. So the motion.
Chair Ferricks, this is
Yeah.
Sue Frost. Did you call my name, Lynette?
I believe I did, but if you want to go ahead and register your vote, I'll make sure.
Yes, I'm an aye. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Frost. So we're now going to move along and hear item number 3 that was pulled off the consent calendar. It's the approval of the 2020 Trade Corridor Enhancement Program project nominations. And Chris Doherty is going to present the item. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair and members of the board. Chris Doherty with the SACOG's Transportation Division. First off, I just wanted to explain the additional language that was inserted into the report. First off, it's important to note that that additional information in the staff report remains in the spirit of the Transportation Commission's unanimous approval to nominate all the projects that are listed in the report to apply for the Trade Corridor Enhancement Project or program. Staff was asked by Caltrans after the drafting of this report to identify a regional priority project from the list of projects that we want to nominate to move forward. Because of the large scale and considerable regional freight benefits, staff has identified the Capital Region Freight Improvement Project that has improvements on both the I-5 corridor and the I-80 corridor as the regional priority. I just want to reiterate that this nomination for a priority project does not affect any of the other projects from moving forward or their competitiveness in this program. And with that, that concludes my comments. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm not seeing any hands raised yet from folks, but I also would like to know, first of all, is there any member of the public that wishes to comment on this item? Communications?
There are no public comments.
Great. So looking for the hands raised. Not
Allard, move approval.
We have an Allard moving approval. Do we have a second?
Sailor seconds.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So we have a motion and a second. Any further questions, comments, or discussion on this item? Hearing and seeing none. Great. Lynette will move to the roll call, please.
Thank you. Allard,
Yes.
Cabaldon, sorry, Cabaldon,
I believe he has had to step away for a few minutes. So
okay, thank you. Douglas,
Yes.
Flores,
Yes.
Frost,
Aye.
Gallardo,
Yes.
Gore,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Jankovitz,
Yes.
Jennings,
Yes.
Joyner,
Yes.
Kitty,
Aye.
Kozlowski,
Yes.
Leahy,
Yes.
Lozano,
Yes.
New, Director New, can you indicate
Yes.
your vote? Thank you.
Yes.
Onderko,
Yes.
Peters,
Yes.
Sander,
Aye.
Zaragoza, okay, moving on, Sailor, Director Sailor,
Aye.
Chenier,
Aye.
Slowey,
Aye.
Spokley,
Yes.
Ballard,
Yes.
Thune,
Yes.
Pixa,
Yes.
Deerkamp,
Aye.
West,
Yes.
Vice Chair Samayoa,
Yes.
Chair Frericks.
aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Great, thank you so much. So we're going to move now on to item 5, which is an action item on the draft framework for regional early action planning funds, the REAP funds. Jennifer Hargrove is going to present the item. And then also, I just want to, after the presentation, we'll obviously have an opportunity for public comment, but I'd really like Matt Spokley, Director Spokley, to provide an update too, since this item went through the Lunar Committee, and that would be really appreciated. Thank you. Jennifer,
Great.
go.
Thank you. Good morning. I am going to start sharing my screen really quick. I have a short presentation. There we go. Okay, again, good morning. Jennifer Hargrove of your SACOG staff. I am excited to be here today to talk to you about the Regional Early Action Planning Funds. Today, we are requesting your action on a draft framework for how we spend our remaining REAP funds. The action itself is a little bit lengthy, so I'll just let you read it in the staff report, but it's basically requesting your approval of the framework and also the resolution that we will need in order to apply for these funds. And then authorizing sort of a lot of the planning and the procurement and the agreements that we need to execute the framework. You'll recall that REAP is a result of Assembly Bill 101, which was passed last year, that grants money to COGs like SACOG from HCD, the Housing and Community Development Department for the state. And that money is coming to us for housing related planning. We've talked with the Land Use and Natural Resources Committee about these funds and this framework for the last few months. We've really built the framework on these guiding principles that the REAP funds should support the 2020 MTP SCS, in particular, should plan and accelerate for more infill housing and more product choice, and that it should leverage future funding opportunities such as Green Means Go. And now I'll jump into the actual draft framework that's before you today. You'll recall that the first box here that's labeled the first 25%, that was approved by the board back in March. So we are moving ahead and working right now with HCD on getting those funds, and then we will be allocating them based on what you see here, which was part of the framework that the board approved back in March. I think my best guess at this point is hopefully we're about 4 to 6 weeks from getting that funding from HCD so that we can start distributing that for work, helping out on housing elements and the Civic Lab Year 2 projects. And then this middle box is really what I'm here to talk to you about today, and the framework that you have in attachment A is about how we spend the remaining 75% of these funds, just under $5 million. Before I jump into that framework and go over all the components, I do want to draw your attention to the last box here about a South Lake Tahoe adjustment. So when the state was setting up the REAP program and allocating how much funding was going to each COG throughout the state, they used a population formula to do so. So our 6.7 million roughly that we have for REAP overall is based on the population of our region. However, in a bit of an oversight of how the program was created, the city of South Lake Tahoe's population was included as part of our region, which, as you all know, they're not part of our COG. So we've been working with the city of South Lake Tahoe as well as HCD on the solution, and it's HCD's recommendation that we would pass through those funds to South Lake Tahoe, but they would take on the monitoring and reporting and the administration needed for making sure South Lake Tahoe is using those funds appropriately, but we would be the agency passing it through to them. So I just wanted to call that out. And then I'll jump now into, again, that middle box, which is the framework we're here to talk about today. I'm going to talk about each of the components, and I'll do it in reverse order. So staff costs, then the competitive grant we're proposing, then the non-competitive grants, and then the Civic Lab housing series. So we have included about 5% of the funds towards staff time. This is administrative costs, but also staff work. So everything from administering the program over the next 3 years, but also some staff work is needed for the Civic Lab project, as well as setting up these grants. And so I'm happy to elaborate more on that if there's questions about it. The next component of the framework is we've included about $1.7 million, which is about 25% of our total REAP funding, for a competitive grant. This is a grant that would be targeting housing planning activities in our future green zones. The next item from me on the agenda later is about a framework for establishing those green zones. And again, just going back to our guiding principles for REAP, we really saw using some of these funds as a way to help advance our Green Means Go strategy by focusing planning activities in some of our future green zones. This framework is really just setting this up at a high level. It's basically saying we can use approximately $1.7 million of this REAP funds towards a competitive grant, but the details of that grant in terms of the application process and a framework for it, that would come to you later this fall as part of the bigger funding round discussions that you're continuing to have with Matt and Garrett. The next component of the framework is roughly $2.8 million in non-competitive grants. So this would be funding for a wide range of housing activities, everything like specific plans, CEQA clearing housing sites, zoning changes, infrastructure studies needed to support increased housing, changes in your fee structure. There's a wide range of activities that would be eligible for this as long as there's a nexus to increasing and or accelerating housing supply. And this would be available to each jurisdiction based on the share of units in the regional housing needs allocation. So as shown on the table here, the dollar amounts we're proposing really scale up as the number of units being planned for scale up. This non-competitive grant would have a very simple application process. We definitely don't want to make an onerous or a tedious process for funds that we're guaranteeing to you, but we do need to make sure that the funds are spent consistent with this framework and consistent with state expectations. So we would require just a very simple letter to us with the intent of how the funds would be spent. And then I do want to note quickly that for both these non-competitive grants, as well as the competitive grant that I just spoke about, SACOG is planning to procure a bench of consultants that can be available for any of the eligible activities. So hopefully that will streamline if any of the local agencies want to enter an agreement with us to use that bench of consultants for any of these activities. We can perhaps streamline the procurement process and help some of that time as well and get the money flowing a little bit quicker. That would be voluntary, not required to use that bench. And then lastly, we're proposing to use a small amount of the funding for an accelerated mini Civic Lab series and technical assistance program. The primary purpose of this is really to complement the other two components of the framework, the competitive grant and the non-competitive grant. We want to provide some workshops and technical assistance to support local agencies and what they'll be doing with their REAP funds. So we would be working with your staff to identify 4 topic areas and then associated technical assistance. The list I have on the screen is just an example to give you a sense of how that would work. So for example, if one of the 4 topics was accessory dwelling units, then we would host an online workshop about that topic and then provide some sort of related technical assistance. And in this case, the example is we would maybe procure pre-approved ADU plans that then each jurisdiction could tailor to their own codes and then allow for more streamlined over-the-counter processing of those. So it's a component of 4 online workshops and then technical assistance that would go with it. And that's the framework in a nutshell. There's a lot more detail to the framework in your attachment A. But I do want to also quickly go over the draft timeline and the feedback that we've received so far. The draft calendar here is not that detailed because there are some variables at play, so it's definitely subject to moving around a little bit. But as I said, we're hoping to get that first 25% of the funding in the next month and a half and get that out the door. And then we'll be applying for the remaining funds per this framework if the action is so today. And then our goal would really be start that Civic Lab housing series, those 4 sessions, as quickly as possible this fall. And then the non-competitive grant would be open for an over-the-counter style application process, basically any time between October and January, accepting those letters of how you plan to spend your non-competitive funding. And then we would really be looking at starting the competitive funding round, again, targeting those green zones in the early part of next year, perhaps around February. And finally, I'd like to talk about the local agency review and the comments on this framework. We've received, local agencies have had the framework for review the last couple of months. We've heard, and we had a planning session online to discuss it and make sure everybody is aware and answer any questions. We have a lot of like no comment or okay, or clarifying questions that sort of signal general acceptance. We do have a comment letter from the City of Citrus Heights that was included in your packet as attachment C. There's also a comment letter from the City of Sacramento, which is included in your attachment D. And then I'd be happy to go over those comment letters and response, but I would like to just turn it over back to you, Chair, for any discussion or questions.
Great, thank you very much, Jennifer. I appreciate that. I just want to first check. I know Chair Spokley is going to speak here in a second. I just want to check though, Lynette, is there anybody from the public who wishes to comment on this item?
No, there's not.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate that update. So yeah, Director Spokley, please, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Chair Fredericks. Appreciate the opportunity to provide the board with an update from the Lunar Committee. We did hear this item earlier in the month. We had a good lively discussion regarding the framework and the stated goals. I wanted to just cover a few of the topics that we spent most of our time kind of talking about. The Green Means Go mini-series that was just mentioned, I think is good. Excuse me, the Civic Lab housing series, I think is a good program for us to get back into. The housing needs that face all of our communities are still out there very much. The pandemic didn't help our situation with the slowing of housing starts. But looking at ways to streamline the processes, looking at ADU opportunities for each of our communities, those are some of the things that we spent quite a bit of time talking about in our committee meeting. The other thing that we talked quite a bit about was the corridors, the commercial corridors in each of our communities, the potential for those to become green zones where we can focus our energy, focus some of these dollars on enhancements to some of our decaying commercial corridors was another item that we spent quite a bit of time on. Again, these funds are going to be split across 3 different basic categories as mentioned, and we were fully supportive of the staff recommendations to move these funds forward and get them out to our communities.
Thank you very much for that update. Appreciate that. So wanted to just sort of check in and appreciate the work of the committee on this item. I want to check in and see if there are any questions or comments from other directors first, and certainly also willing to entertain a motion.
Chair, I'll move the item. Thank you
Very much, Director Suen. Do we have a
second?
That was Director Zaragoza, it looks like. Zaragoza. Thank you for that. So a motion and a second. Any additional questions, comments, or discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Go right ahead, Director Saylor.
Saylor here. I just want to congratulate the Lunar Committee for the nuanced effort here. This is a balanced way to use these funds. I think it addresses multiple goals that we have. It provides, it directs the funds to leverage the strategies that we've got for meeting RHNA goals. It's a way to recognize that the jurisdictions that are stepping up to provide additional housing through the RHNA program are given some resources to help them move that direction. Every jurisdiction gets some support, and there are opportunities for highly competitive concepts to come forward and be funded. I'm just really impressed with the way that your committee threaded the needle, and I appreciate the staff recommendation. I'm strongly in support of this approach.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Other directors with comments at all, questions or comments? Across the screens here. I would just, remind folks too that, that this REAP item is, just a first in a series of items that are all really interconnected. I mean, we're certainly surrounding the issues of housing, but also Green Means Go, green zones, and then frankly, just also the state lobbying efforts that are underway as well, too, and advocacy efforts. So just to make that point as well. Not seeing any other further questions from directors. We have a motion and a second. No further discussion, so we will go to a roll call, please.
Great, thank you, and thanks for your patience as we get through this last roll call vote. Allard?
Yes.
Cabalden? It looks like he is still stepped away. Douglas?
That's correct.
Yes.
Flores?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes.
Gallardo?
Yes.
Gore? Harris?
Yes.
Jankovich? Director Jankovich, are you there? Could you indicate your vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Jennings?
Yes.
Joyner?
Yes.
Kennedy? Director Kennedy? Oh, thank you. Kozlowski?
Yes.
Leahy?
Yes.
Lozano?
Aye.
New?
Yes.
Onderko? Director Onderko, could you indicate your vote? Okay, moving on. Peters?
Aye.
Sander?
Aye.
Zaragoza? Director Zaragoza, could you indicate your vote?
Aye.
Thank you. Saylor?
Aye.
Chenier?
Aye.
Chloe?
Aye.
Stokely?
Yes.
Ballard?
Yes.
Soon?
Aye.
Tixa?
Yes.
Veerkamp?
Aye.
West?
Yes.
Vice Chair Samayoa?
Yes.
Chair Frericks?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Great, thank you very much. So now we're going to move to the information portion of the agenda. Item 6 is establishing a green zone to support Green Means Go. And Jennifer Hargrove is going to present this item as well.
Yep. I'm going to start sharing my screen again. I have just a short presentation on green zones. Get that going. Okay. Yep, today I'm here to present on the Green Means Go, specifically the green zones. As you all know, Green Means Go is an important strategy for reducing vehicle miles traveled in the region and also achieving our 19% greenhouse gas reduction target. But we also see this strategy as helping in so many other ways, achieving many of the other goals of the MTP-SCS. It can help revitalize the commercial corridors and main streets. As Director Spokley was just talking about, we do think it helps preserve ag land by focusing on infill areas. It helps better utilize existing public assets and infrastructure, hopefully accelerates housing production and increases economic activity. At a very high level, Green Means Go is a strategy of three things, and they really are sort of a layered approach. First, starting with this increased and accelerating infill development, and then layering on transportation options and electric vehicle infrastructure. Green Means Go really is about targeting investment in a specific place to achieve the MTP SES goals that I just mentioned. And really the first step in a place-based investment strategy is to identify the place or the set of places. And those are the green zones that we've been talking about throughout the process. At a high level, we've always talked about these green zones being in infill areas. And this is a map from our MTP SCS, where the red are the centers and corridors, the gray are the established communities, and together those really make up the areas that we call infill areas in our region. And again, the reason we're focused on these infill areas is because typically these are the places where we see a mix of uses, some density of people and things, more transportation options. And those are a lot of the characteristics that you need to be able to reduce VMT on a per capita basis, even as more development is happening in the area. So there's a draft framework for establishing green zones that is in your packet as attachment A. I'm just going to quickly go over the key components of that draft framework. The first is what I just talked about. It has to be in an infill area. It's as defined by the centers and corridors or established communities in our MTP. And then because this really is about accommodating and accelerating growth in these infill areas, the local policies have to be in place to support that growth. And because of that, we really see this as necessary that this effort be led by local cities and counties. You all know your communities the best, and it really should be you and your staff that lead the way nominating which areas of your community are what you want to nominate and prioritize as these green zones. There would be an online application just as a way for us to collect the green zones that are being nominated by each agency, a very simple application. We'll also be providing a data and mapping tool so that as you want to consider other factors as you're looking to prioritize and designate your green zones, we'll have a map with as much data as we can provide available. We really do encourage partnerships with other entities as well. As you can imagine, once the green zone is established, there's opportunities within that green zone for many other projects. So partnering with transit agencies and air district and utility companies will all be key and critical, bringing them into the conversation. And then finally, I just want to look at the timeline for this. We've brought the draft framework through the Land Use and Natural Resource Committee last month. We've had discussions about it in months prior. It's coming to you today really as an information item because it does relate to the last item I was just talking about, and then your next item on really the lobbying efforts around Green Means Go. Your staff, I've shared with them this draft framework earlier this week, and I'm asking for their input throughout the summer. We'll also be sharing it much more broadly with all of our stakeholders and partners so that we can collect any thoughts and input on this draft framework. And then we would be coming back to the board in August to request an action. Once we have that framework in place in the process, we would just launch right in, have that locally led nomination process happen through the fall so that hopefully by December, we are in a place where we have all of the green zones identified and the board could take an action on that. And then again, just tying it to the last item we just talked about, where there's roughly 25% of the REAP funding going towards a competitive grant program that will be geared at these green zone areas. And with that, I will kick it back to the chair for any discussion and questions. Again, this is just an information item today. We'll be collecting a lot of input throughout the summer and coming back to you in August.
Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate that very much. Are there any members of the board with questions or comments at all now? Scanning the two, toggling between the two screens here, not seeing any. So, oh yeah, Director Spokley.
Thank you very much. Again, just want to speak quickly. We did hear this item as well at our last lunar meeting. And this program in particular, at least for my small community, is exciting. These green zones are going to be, I think, a good tool for us to kind of advance the Green Means Go initiative and get this thing going. So we were excited to see this item. It was well thought out by staff. We also had a good discussion about this at our committee meeting, and we're excited about this initiative as well.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. That's really good news to hear from in terms of your community being interested in this issue. Other directors with questions or comments? Again, scanning and looking for raised hands and such. Okay, not seeing any. So great, thank you very much, Jennifer. Appreciate that. We will move now then to item 7, which is the advocacy update. Oh yeah, James, go ahead.
Sorry about that. I just want to, it may now be, I know we've talked a lot about this. We're about to hear a presentation around a lot of our state efforts, but just to build on Director Spokley's comments, I feel really excited about this program because it really is a homegrown, bottom-up approach to implementing our SES, to doing what you all call economic development, providing more housing opportunities and doing it in a way that's climate friendly. It is homegrown, and it is not, I hope it's not lost on any of you that this is going to take some work in the next 6 months in terms of your local staff, but it's all about you driving where these places should be, these green zones. Right, and it will give us, actually, it will make us more competitive in state grants once we have this as a region, and it will be our program that is unique to this region that fits into this advocacy piece that you're about to hear about. So at the risk of repeating things or telling you what you already know, I want to really put the emphasis on the local aspect of this as Jennifer presented. It's gone a long way so far in a lot of our efforts at the state level. And it's something I think to be proud of and to build on. So thanks.
Great, thank you very much. Any additional questions or comments at all from folks before we move along now to item 7, which is the advocacy update. And Christina is going to introduce the item, and then I know that we've got some folks. I think I saw it, both Ed Manning and Vanessa Kahina from KP Public Affairs also on the screens here. Go right ahead, Christina.
Thank you. We are going to provide first an update on Green Means Go, and as you mentioned, hear from our lobbyists, and then we'll also provide an update on our efforts related to potential federal stimulus. As Chair Frericks and Jennifer have already said, the REAP funding framework, the Green Zones draft framework item, and the Green Means Go program and advocacy are all interrelated as we focus on accelerating infill development and housing options. Green Means Go will obviously be key to helping provide additional financial support to these efforts. So on that and the budget, on Monday, the legislature did pass a state budget, and as expected, Green Means Go funding was not included. This budget has been referred to as a placeholder budget or a technicality in order to meet the June 15th constitutional deadline to pass a budget. It reflects an agreement between the two houses, the Senate and the Assembly, but not the governor. The legislature is expected to continue to revisit the state budget through at least August as it continues to respond to the pandemic and after the receipt of tax payments that are due now on July 15th. And so that's where our Green Means Go advocacy comes in. As we've previously mentioned, we are shifting our focus to the August budget discussions and focusing on the governor's economic task force, economic recovery task force. It has a much longer, more complicated name. So today we're going to hear from our lobbyists with KP Public Affairs to provide more of an update. We have Vanessa Kahina, Brian White, and Ed Manning. And so with that, I will hand it off, I believe, to Ed.
Thanks very much,
Christina. Appreciate it. And I'd just like to say the previous presentation is heartening and important because all that work that you're doing at the local level to identify these green zones and actually put some skin in the game by putting some of your own dollars in to attach to housing development in those areas based on your RENA allocation, that really helps to convince, I think, the administration and legislators that how committed you are to this program. So that's the first time we saw that, and that's really helpful to us, and we're definitely going to reference that in our materials with the state. I believe we have a PowerPoint. There we go. Okay, if you could go to the next slide, please. So just from our Green Means Go advocacy standpoint, there's sort of two universes we have worked in, as most of you have. There's the pre-COVID and the post-COVID. And so things were going pretty well in the pre-COVID effort. We have developed substantial materials. Many of you have seen that for advocacy purposes, outlining Green Means Go, showing the existing grant programs that would be a source of funding. We met with all of those agencies. We organized the entire delegation. We have had them communicate with the administration as well as you. It's really the first time I've been around that we actually had our delegation significantly organized, and we had planned on we had also, by the way, engaged, your staff did a great job engaging all the regional stakeholders across the board to be supportive. And we had planned on trying to include money in the budget through the budget subcommittee process. And then COVID happened, and the budget subcommittee process was pretty much eviscerated. We went back to a baseline budget, and the world was put on its head. Next slide, please. So now we have an updated legislative calendar. A significant deficit, as Christina mentioned, both houses passed a budget, but are still haggling with the governor over various aspects of it. We anticipate a significant number of trailer bills to help implement the budget between now and the end of the session in August, along with other potential budget fixes along the way. Next slide, please. I go ahead to the next one. Thank you. One of the things we did was evaluate after the governor's budget came out. They rated a lot of funds, but we did identify still a sufficient amount of discretionary grant funding in the pots you see there that are still funded, and of which we could take a share of the funding for our region. And instead of the funding being used for one-off projects throughout the state that compete, they could be used for the region to reinforce our sustainable community strategy and Green Means Go strategy. The other thing I should mention is, although it looks now that there's not going to be a bond, we did organize the COGS, the COG statewide organization that represents all the COGs, to try to create a bond funding source as well. Had discussed that with a number of legislators, but there is likely not going to be a resiliency bond, and therefore we're solely focused now on the grant funding. Next. Once the legislature went on hiatus and then came back and the whole budget process was upended, we started talking about how to breathe life or continue to breathe life into our effort, and focused on the governor's economic recovery task force, and in particular, the subcommittee that focuses on infrastructure and capital markets. The co-chairs of the governor's committee are Tom Steyer, who many of you know from his reputation and work, and Ann O'Leary, who's the chief of staff to the governor. And so as we thought about it, you know, if you could find something, a program that, one, used existing funding that's still available, two, address climate change, three, address short-term infrastructure projects and created jobs for public works, and also created more housing, boy, wouldn't that be a great idea? And fortunately for us, we have that idea. It's called Green Means Go. And so we started to focus on the task force, and in particular focus on the subcommittee for capital markets and infrastructure to get them to adopt Green Means Go as their own. Thank you for your work. There was a letter that was signed by every local elected official involved with SACOG and otherwise, along with a letter from our legislative delegation and from all our stakeholders, all of which was aimed at the subcommittee. And that was very helpful. And since then, we've done tremendous outreach to each of the task force members, one-on-one meetings, either via Zoom or in person, mainly via Zoom or phone call, to try to get them to endorse Green Means Go. That outreach is continuing. The subcommittee chairs are Secretary Lourdes Castro Ramirez. We have a meeting pending with her. Emil Haddad from 5 Points. I've talked to folks at 5 Points. James and I had a long conversation with Robbie Hunter, who runs the California Building Trades Council, and James met with Cynthia Parker, who runs Bridge Housing. In addition, there are other members of the subcommittee, including the Lieutenant Governor. We talked to the Lieutenant Governor's office. We are meeting, Brian White and I are meeting today with Derek Koalapai, who runs the UA, which is essentially the plumbers union. We continue to meet one-on-one with them. We've also put together, your staff has done a great job putting together a list of shovel-ready projects. One of the questions that we got is, how can you give us some details on job creation, on what we could expect to see if we help SACOG get access to this funding? Your staff put together a great list of shovel-ready projects throughout the region, infrastructure projects that, if we got the funding, would be able to move forward very quickly and ultimately would result in not only the short-term work, but also follow up economic development through residential housing and commercial development. Next slide, please. Here's a name of some of the folks who are on the key subcommittee that we're focused on. I don't know that anybody has relationships with people like Tim Cook at Apple or Oscar De La Torre, the former Botzer, but if you do, that would be great. We are obviously focused on the people we do have relationships with, and trying to move the ball forward. So on this list here, you'll see the Lieutenant Governor, who we have had her staff, chief of staff, good conversations with. I mentioned Derek Koalapai, George Marcus of Marcus and Millichap. We have an in to him. And so with the rest of these folks, if anyone has relationships, we would welcome your help on that. Next slide. So in short, what we're trying to do, by the way, I should mention that Mayor Steinberg is also engaged in helping in this effort with the task force and otherwise. And what we're trying to do is get some momentum through the task force. We have our legislative delegation still engaged and still looking at an opportunity to use existing funds, not new funds, and reallocate a fair share to this region to implement Green Means Go. And in our work, I mean, there's no doubt that no other region really is doing what you're doing as far along as you are. And so we're still cautiously optimistic that we have an outside chance here to try to get funding. And that's it. Open to questions or any discussion.
Thank you very much, Ed. Appreciate that. Very good update and overview. First of all, so any questions from members of the board at all? Questions or comments? Looking through the screens here, and then also just want to, Director Zaragoza.
Hey, Ed. Good morning.
Morning.
I just wanted to ask, what's been the feedback from the task force members? Has there been any sort of consistency to their responses when we've had discussions on Green Means Go with them? Just wondering where, if, from an individual standpoint, where we might be able to provide additional lobbying to these folks.
Sure. Thanks, Michael. In terms of we've spoken to, for example, Lieutenant Governor's office twice. The first conversation, they wanted a more granular analysis on the projects, which we then provided, which I think was very helpful to them. It's over $100 million in projects that are real with some real numbers attached to them. And thank you all the folks, all the SACOG members who helped develop that information. The other thing is we did fill out, there's a one-page document that the subcommittee is using to submit to the task force to put ideas forward, projects forward. And so we filled that out for both the Lieutenant Governor and for Robbie Hunter to see if they would go forward. We had a very, very good discussion with Robbie Hunter about the nature of the program. One of the things that he was focused on is, how to integrate skilled and trained local hiring programs, ideas like that. Those are obviously issues we can deal with on implementation through the budget if we were to draft language. But the feedback was pretty positive. At this point, what we really need is a champion to just put that application in. We've provided not only the filled out application, but also all supporting materials that we have, including letters, background information, project lists. So they've got it all, and we just need help getting them motivated to be our champions. So,
got it. No, thanks, Ed. And I can certainly help there as well with Robbie, Doug, McCarron, some other people. So we can talk more offline on that.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. Appreciate that. Any other directors with questions or comments? Really appreciate the thorough overview and update, Ed, and the work that you and Brian and Vanessa have been doing is really most appreciated. And actually, no one anticipated a worldwide pandemic sort of throwing a rather large monkey wrench into the otherwise massive state budget surpluses and such. So obviously we've had to make some adjustments accordingly, but I think that you guys are doing really good work, and I think I'm pretty confident that at some point that something will give and we'll be successful. So appreciate the work very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions, comments at all? I'm not seeing any, looking across the different screens here. Okay, great. Thanks so much. Christina, anything else actually from you on this?
No, I think James has an update on the federal efforts.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah, just a quick update on federal, but actually before we leave Ed's presentation and that subcommittee, Again, I just want to make sure that if any of the board members, thank you, Director Saragosa, but if you have connections and relationships to those names on there, I note the other one was Michael Burke, AECom, Mike Burke. So some of you may be in those circles where AECom is a well-known player. Also, Lieutenant Governor. I know some of you have some relationships there. So as much as we can get in front of them, the subcommittee that Ed mentioned, Capital Markets Infrastructure, meets on Monday, and we'll meet again July 6th. So we are, time is of the essence. I just wanted to round off this advocacy update with a quick federal. We are obviously focused really hard at the state level and really appreciate the work of KP and many of you helping out. At the federal level, as you probably have heard, and I have put it in my executive director report this month, there has been talk of a large infrastructure stimulus bill. And as you know, before I came to SACOG, I was working on these issues at the federal level. Feel a little bit like Charlie Brown with Lucy pulling the football away. Every time they talk about infrastructure, I think there's no way they're going to do this. We had President Trump and Speaker Pelosi 2 months ago say $2 trillion for shovel-ready infrastructure, the one thing they've agreed on recently. So we got together and did a lot of great work with many of your staff but other agencies, and we went around the region and looked at what is truly ready to go in terms of projects across every kind of infrastructure that we could imagine. We are now readying and finalizing a list that is north of $9 billion and includes everything from, of course, transportation to advanced mobility, to flood control, emergency preparedness, hospital construction. And interestingly, and I'm happy to talk more offline about this, but one of the harder ones to get was broadband and high-speed communications. And don't we all feel the need for that? And especially if you're in more rural areas or mountainous areas, we are between telework, but also telehealth, remote school. We are seeing this as a major gap and a disparity that we're going to be talking more about in the months ahead. So we finalized this. We have over 50 agencies that have actually contributed. Really appreciate that. The House Transportation Committee is actually marking up a transportation and high-speed communications bill as we speak. Had a long marathon markup yesterday. It's continued into today. We're not quite sure where the Senate's at on this. To be very clear, which is the part of the course in this business. There is no guarantee they will actually get a bill done this year in an election year. But what we wanted to do was actually show that we had one voice, that we are one region, that we are united across all these different agencies, even working with some of our private construction partners and firms. And we plan to release that report to our congressional delegation either next week or the week of July the 6th, depending on timing. And again, it really is arming them to help go get infrastructure funding in Congress. So stay tuned for that. It's been a great, frankly, way to open a lot of doors to a lot of agencies that we don't actually have a great working relationship. No, it's not great. We just don't. We don't do a lot of work with flood control. But even going back to Green Means Go, increasingly we're actually talking to folks like Regional SAN and the Regional Water Authority and others about how they might actually help in our local efforts on Green Means Go. So that's the update. Happy to share a final with all of you when we get there. We're putting the finishing touches on it now, and that rounds out the advocacy report.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So we'll move along now to item 8, which is the regional telework long-term support for employers, employees. Monica is going to present this, and actually just Monica, it's listed for 10 minutes here on the agenda. I would, if you're able to, because there's a few things that we want to I want to, and the vice chair want to outline after this item. I would really love, we could try to keep it to no more than 10 minutes if possible. Thank you. Total. No problem. Yep. Don't mean to short circuit it, but I'm worried that we're going to start losing some folks. I'm getting messages that we are, so I'm wanting to try and have some. Yeah, people are jumping ship. So okay.
Great. So today, what I'd really like to be able to do is a quick update on our work. Also, show you exactly or talk to you about what we've been doing, what we've heard to date. So I do want to emphasize we are starting this program to support employers to maintain levels of telework. So I'm going to just highlight this slide again. We've seen this massive dip. We are on the uptick already and continue to see that increase in VMT. And we know that we do want the economy to turn around, and we expect to see more vehicles on the road. That is a good sign. But and we know that we know that businesses are going to maintain some levels of telework no matter what SACOG does, whether we have a program or not. Public and private sector are out thinking about how they might do this. So that leaves SACOG with the question, what might we be able to do and provide in technical assistance so that we can maintain that trend of telework at a higher level, perhaps even increase it, and then how we might provide the tools to help companies that have not been successful yet with telework, or as successful as they might be more successful. An important question that we had in committee was about claiming credit for this drop in VMT. Given the time, I won't be able to totally dive into this, but there's no simple answer, a yes, no, can we claim credit in our MTP or in other state or federal actions. So air quality is measured with a look back at monitors. And typically in the spring, the air quality is pretty good. We have already talked with the Sacramento Air Quality Management District. We're also meeting with all of the region's air pollution control officers so that we can, one, share information, two, be able to document changes and measure those changes. So the question was really about, can we just claim credit right now? And we're not able to do that. We need to demonstrate that there is a savings, and we need to also commit through funding programs that support the actions. So for example, if we see a huge benefit in 2021 tied to the telework programs that we are launching now, then in a future opportunity, we could begin to claim that credit. So I also wanted to highlight that we have a bigger team than just myself. And you will likely be seeing Adrian and Bruce at some point, certainly Adrian more sooner. She is going to be the program manager. You might remember her from all of the work that she has done leading Civic Lab. And we are really modeling much of our programming design through the Civic Lab style. So currently we've been on the listen and learn, and we've had some focus groups initially. The remainder of June and early July, we are going to be building and deploying our pilot programs. And then we are going to consider at the end of the year what we might be scaling or failing. All right, so some of the early insights with our focus groups. We've met with over 40 people, 30 different organizations and employers, both public and private. And there are a lot of opportunities and a lot of challenges. Some of the things we've heard about are issues with people using a home computer with antivirus not up to the right level, lots of spam coming through or infections. There's an interesting issue with companies that have offices both within California and in other states, and the different compliance needs that they have from an HR perspective. We've heard also that, a lot of interest, like people really want to see how they might leverage this. We certainly know that there are issues with equity on who is actually able to telework significantly. And then we've heard from a lot of folks that templates that we could provide potentially around HR side, the compliance side, the technology side. And as I mentioned earlier, excuse me, we are working with the air districts on tracking, monitoring, and reporting to assess if there is a measurable level from the shelter-in-place orders on air quality. So really quickly, I want to discuss some of the potentials that could be pilot projects. We definitely know that we need more than just an informational campaign. So you might think of that informational campaign as something like we've done with May is Bike Month. We know that we need more. There's definitely this, we are hearing from the focus groups, a hybrid. So some telework, not an ongoing telework, not permanent telework, but this hybrid. Employers are definitely expressing that they are missing some of the good things that come from those collisions in the workplace. So we're thinking about how we might pre-qualify a bench of experts who can consult with these businesses. And then also we've heard from the public sector side an interest in getting a match made with a similar jurisdiction facing the same challenges from a public perspective. We heard that on the private side as well. That's something that we've done in Civic Lab, where we match jurisdictions who might have a similar size and issue to kind of problem solve and share best practices. There was also interest in how we might revisit our different programs and how we could potentially provide support for workers who are not getting a telework opportunity or benefit. And that might be things like, can we provide guaranteed ride home programs so that we're supporting more transit use? I do want to be mindful of the request to get a little get done a little faster. So we're also exploring how we provide this technical assistance. We have companies that are already interested, private sector, public sector, and then for the board, kind of what can you do next? One, I want to hear concerns that you might have. What we've done in the focus group is really ask about barriers so that we can help overcome those barriers through this program. But certainly asking if your municipality is ready for telework. What are they missing? And please do, we do recognize that our pilots are going to start off small in number, meaning we're not going to say, have 5,000 employees in July ready to go. But we hope to have both a mix of public and private entities, because while there are some similarities, there are certainly very different challenges. We need to explore some more of the barriers with the labor perspective as well, and unions. So I'm going to stop right there and welcome questions or comments.
Thanks very much, Monica. I appreciate that. So directors with questions or comments, sort of looking through the screen here. Okay, not seeing too many. Well, thank you very much. I know this is just an update, but and there's more to be done here. And I know there's going to be a webinar on this item coming up. I think if it's not in end of July, it'll be in August at some point. So regional webinar on it too, so we can make sure that folks are aware of that and when that's happening, and help publicize it and across the jurisdictions and such. So appreciate your work on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Chair Ferrix, could I comment briefly?
Yes, Director Kozlowski, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just, a while back, we had a presentation that was about the transportation need to, be able to regionally move people around. And I don't want to lose sight of one of the questions that I asked that day, which is why wouldn't we move the jobs to where the people are? I think, Monica, you're doing fantastic work, and I'm really, really excited about this particular initiative, because moving the jobs to people's homes is so much more of a killer app than building more rail or freeway capacity. So hitting a home run right here can make Sacramento the corporate headquarters of choice that isn't a corporate headquarters, right? So thank you very much. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, noted. And I'll just add that Greater Sacramento Economic Council, we've been working with them, the Metro Chamber, some of the smaller chambers, and there's a lot of interest and support. And we're hoping to capitalize on that, but we're also very focused on any blind spots we might have from our staff side.
Thank you very much for that. And Mr. Vice Chair, go right ahead.
One thing that I want to plug, just a local business here in Marysville, who's kind of started about a couple of years ago, and they provide space for folks who are working, on the road and stuff, and they provide creative space, they provide office, and they've seen a total increase in demand for their services, just because what's going on, And so I think I guess my point is, I think also take a look at maybe, entrepreneur opportunities for folks to create kind of these creative hubs so people can work, maybe they don't necessarily have to work out of their house, but maybe they have a space reserved somewhere they can rent out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other comments or questions from directors at all? Otherwise, we will move along. Thanks so much, Monica. Appreciate that update and the work on this. So we'll move now for just item number 9, chair's report, and also the item 10 is the board members report. And sort of, I think we'll move quickly through this, I think, but also it's one to have a bit of a conversation and get folks sort of initial thoughts and feedback, and then we can and James will want to obviously offer his executive director's report as well, but I think we'll speak to some of this as well. I just wanted to, in this chair's report sort of section, just wanted to address an issue that I know that's been certainly on my mind a lot over the course of the past almost month now, but I think it's been on pretty much everyone's mind is the issues surrounding race and justice and inclusion. And it's something that is certainly, I think, a difficult topic, but for one that's also sparked a lot of emotional debate, in our own respective jurisdictions and certainly around the country. And I've been having a bunch of conversations with folks all over the place about some of this stuff, but also including, certainly talked to the vice chair quite a great deal about this, and also with James and staff. And, I think and a number of, I've been, selectively calling directors just as I've been in different events with other folks and just having conversations about it a bit. And, I think that, the SACOG board should have a conversation about it as well. And I also would say I don't really, claim to have all the answers certainly to this sort of some of these issues, but I do think that there's more that we can be doing. I think that, we can be more intentional about disadvantaged communities, about issues of race and inclusion. And so I've, spoken at length with Vice Chair Somayoa, and, I would like to, not just I, but we would like to propose, a board working group on this topic, and would love to ask for volunteers to be a part of it. He is going to sort of chair the effort. I want to just be also, totally upfront that I don't want to this is not just for some, get together to come up with some sort of principles or something. I mean, and I also am not there's no commitment to that we are, having a huge amount of actions out of it either. But I think a further discussion is warranted on some of these issues. And, I think there's a lot of, I think one thing I've heard consistently from folks that I've been talking to is that we don't just want it to be some sort of fluff thing. There is a need for some actions, and especially as it relates to SACOG and seeing how we can, be intentional about some of these items, I think is an important thing. I think that, SACOG staff have also been having some very direct conversations about this, particularly with, I know James has been working on, had a pretty intense, comprehensive staff meeting the other day with everyone about some of these issues, and sort of working on a sort of action plan of items. And I think one of the components of that, of course, there's a lot of things that SACOG staff feel that they can and should be doing. But one of the categories, I think, is also sort of just, how the board of the organization that helps to provide guidance and policy direction setting is also going to be engaged in some of these issues. So, I would appreciate if, first of all, some discussion, if folks are willing to do that, but also, please let me or let us know if you're interested in, something like this, and serving in a body like this. I don't want it to go on for, like 3 years. I think it's, it's sort of, it's about, really emphasis on working group, and having some folks come together and really put their heads together on sort of listening and sharing and dialogue and observing what other best practices are in other jurisdictions, and seeing what's happening in other places, and seeing what types of things we can do here in our own region with this organization. So I've rambled a bit, so I'll just stop right there and certainly let the vice chair speak first, but then would really love to open up for some comments and discussion and such. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair Frericks. I think like many of you probably participated in some march or demonstration in your hometown. And I can tell you that I think for me, the strength of the whole thing was seeing so many young people of all hues, of all genders, and all of a sudden I became a dad and trying to get people, away from the streets and get them back in the sidewalks. It was, you could tell that it's going to be a young people's fight or a struggle that they're going to go through. And I think there's some really, so I think for me, this is not necessarily about what those young people are moving in forward. It's not even about personal biases that we all may have and we have to struggle with and we have to kind of identify and work through. For me, specifically, it really has to do with understanding that we do have racial disparities in our community, in our region. And mainly they have been caused by a lot of systematic institutional systems that we that been, that are here, and we can identify how those have been made, whether it's federal housing policy or federal transportation policy, where highways are put, where they're built. And these racial disparities have really resulted by many of these policies can clearly be seen on incarceration rates, on health outcomes of our community, even access to capital and for new businesses, our blighted neighborhoods. And I think we may be in different sides of this political dynamic that's going on right here, but I really think we are smart enough to see these racial disparities have been caused by current and past policies at all levels of government, whether it's local, state. And bottom line, this really is about, does everyone have the equal freedom to pursue their happiness and pursue what they want to do and be? And I think this body, as a council government, really has an opportunity to lead in tackling many of these structural issues and systematic issues in our communities. It was probably going to take some courage by some of us that are elected, because maybe at our local level, it's not maybe the most popular thing to tackle. But really think about the struggles that being a young Black man feels like when you come out of the street and you're feeling in danger and fear. I can relate to that. I can relate to my own background, being a young Hispanic male and understanding that people somehow had fears when they saw me coming. Maybe I'm unfounded, but they're real. And it really is those biases that are internal between us. I don't necessarily think we have to tackle that, but I think there are structural and systematic things that we can tackle and we do every day, and we just have to be direct about it. So I look forward to working with Chair Frericks and staff and anyone else who wants to kind of put some thought and have some real good, some real discussions about this. That's really what I have to say, and I look forward to taking the lead on this. I think we have a great opportunity here.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I have Director Chenier and Jennings raised hands.
Great, thanks. First, I want to apologize. I got to jump off right after this, but Lucas and Ricky, I just want to say thank you for taking this on. As James will tell you, this is something we discussed when I was sitting in your seat, Lucas, and just never got to it, which I feel bad about, but I think it's really important. We are at a very, very interesting time in our history and our communities. And the world is changing around us, not only in how we work, but in the culture in which we work. And I think that I agree with Ricky, we can be a leader here. We need to recognize that the issues that are in front of us should affect everything we do and how we do it. From what grants we put out to how we work together as a board. And so I just want to say I appreciate it. I'm more than willing to volunteer my time into this. I think this is important. And again, like so many other things, I think that we can be a leader in this. And also I know that there's been discussions with staff that's been going on. I want to say thank you for that, because I think that's where it starts. But we need to think about the staff. We need to think about our investments, and we certainly need to think about the board and how we look towards the future to make sure that we're very representative of the populations we serve. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So Director Jennings, Director Gallardo, Director Spokely, and Directors Frost all have raised hands.
I'll be brief if I can.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you for your leadership and for bringing this forward. These are unprecedented times that we have throughout all of our regions. And unfortunately, if you look at history, we've been here before, and we keep coming back to this same place. And I refuse to have my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren have to continue to say that we've been here before and we did nothing. So for this board to take a leadership role or want to take a leadership role, I raise my hand up to say, I'd be proud to be a part of coming together to figure out solutions to make sure that we address some of the symptomatic issues that we have in this region and that we have in this country. I would be proud to do that. And I feel like this is a part of all of our legacies, that we leave something behind that was better than we found it. We cannot continue to see the same thing happening over and over again in all of our regions and do nothing about it other than just talk. Talk must lead to action. Action must lead to leadership. The leadership to change policy and practices and systematic issues that we all know exist in this country. So I too will stand up and say, I'm in 100%, 150%, and I will stay in until we figure out a series of strategies that allows this never to happen again.
Thank you so much, Director Jennings. Appreciate your words. Take that as a yes, resounding yes. So Director Gallardo, and then Spokely, Frost, and Cabaldon.
Thank you so much. I'm not going to even attempt to follow that because Director Jennings hit every single point that I think needed to be made. So I am just raising my hand and saying I'm in and would be happy to participate.
Thank you. Appreciate that very much. Director Spokely, then Frost, and Cabaldon.
Thank you, Chair. I do also appreciate very much that you bringing this issue to the board for this discussion. As leaders, I think we're obligated to jump into this issue and work to figure out how to fix it once and for all. I agree with Jennings that we've been here before. Personal note on from my company's perspective, we put out a notice, and what I realized from our notice that we put out internal to my company, this issue affects everybody differently. The message was very well received within my company, but the varying ranges of how this affects people was what was so surprising to me. And I'm not saying some cared deeply about it, some didn't. I'm saying there were some very interesting reflections that we got responded back to the board that caught me off guard. So this is a big issue. Thank you again for bringing it up. We need to do something. There's a lot of people that we work with, a lot of people in our communities that are really hurting over this, and we can't ignore it. As leaders, we can't bury our heads in the sand. We need to figure out how to work to solve and improve this situation. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Directors Frost, Cabaldon, and Saragosa have their hands raised. Go ahead, Director Frost.
I just want to say that the recent events have just been so tragic. And I talked to so many people. One of the people I talked to is part of public safety, and her comment was, we have a big job ahead of us to heal the community. And I think part of our responsibility as elected public servants is to make sure, even in times of crisis, that we are very thoughtful in the way we approach and look for solutions, rather than just having a quick knee-jerk reaction. This is something that right from the beginning of the founding of America, it wasn't perfect. It needed to be fixed, and there were leaders that came along, like Martin Luther King, who made a difference, a huge difference, who taught us how to change the world in a peaceful way. And so I think it's important to thoughtfully to have this thoughtful dialogue and conversation, and to look for, once and for all, for those solutions. I would also like to be a part of it. I would be proud to be a part of it. And I just want to say, I think everyone should feel like, they should have the opportunity. There's no promise about results in our lives, but there should be that promise. Pardon my computer phone. There should be that promise of opportunity. And so is this a committee? Is this like a separate committee, or?
Yeah, I mean, terming it a working group, but we can work on the terminology. So yeah, it'll be something that's sort of officially appointed. So yeah.
I'd like to volunteer, and I'd be proud to be part of the conversation. Thank you.
Appreciate that very much. We have directors Cabalden and Saragossa, who I see with hands up still.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I'm sorry, I stepped out for a moment to present at the Harvard City Leadership Institute on this exact question and its relation to pandemic resilience. And I really appreciate the chair and the vice chair bringing this forward, and the work of our staff and our team. I keep trying to think of someone else. I don't know if I don't know how many other directors of color have ever served as the chair of this board. I have, and I can't off the top. I'm sure there's got to be another one or two, but the fact that I'm having served here this long, it's an example of one of the challenges that we face as a region. And it's not this board per se in our choices, but then when we talk about sort of the systemic issues that underlie so much of what's going on in our society and has been, it is the composition of this board and politics generally, and the influence of different interest groups in our elections. And there's a whole deep story to be told there. And I welcome the work going forward, and I'm happy to participate and looking forward to it too. But I do want to make a couple of comments about it. And I think first of all is the importance of doing so with humility and a decentering of SACOG and ourselves, our staff as well. I've been, like Director Jennings and Director Saragossa and Director Samayo and others, I've been at this since I've been activist on this issue since I was 12 years old, in the racial justice movement to desegregate schools. And I've been arrested more than probably a good number, probably most of this board around these issues. It didn't just emerge 3 weeks ago. I didn't just become woke. And there is a long struggle ahead, and a lot of our efforts are lying on the road unfulfilled, as Director Jennings said from the past. And I'm not looking to be lectured by the region at this stage. I'm just looking at our own grid, and some humility around what SACOG is, what our moral authority is, what our legitimacy is in this space is in order. And so we should be listening and learning and reflecting and contributing where SACOG is good at contributing. We also need to be not centering as though SACOG is the source of power and authority and the moral compass on this issue when we're not. And I'm also partly saying this to our own younger staff that's involved in a lot of these issues. And we have a younger, more diverse staff than we've had in a long time. And I'm really excited that they're on board to do a lot of this work, joining the effort that's been underway by many of us for a long time, and a recognition that SACOG is an organization that serves its local governments, not the other way around. And that our power comes and it always has come from our ability to meet the needs of our jurisdictions in a way that advances progress. So yes, SACOG's been a powerful force for environmental sustainability and for community engagement, but only when we've done so based on how do we meet the needs of Lincoln and Davis and Galt, right? We don't have independent power to enforce or impose our will. And where we've been good, it's because we've been especially smart on data and policy making. We're good at analysis. We bring something useful and unique to the table. And we ought to think about that as we proceed with our work here at SACOG now. So I'll tell you, the last thing I need as a city leader under the pressure of COVID and this historic opportunity that I've never seen in my lifetime to grapple with this issue around race, the last thing I need is one more organization that's asking me to spend 6 months working on a framework of principles and issuing statements. And I don't need that, frankly. What I need right now is some help to move while this window is still open, which may not be for very long. How do we make real things happen? And how can SACOG be helpful in that way? So, many jurisdictions have been talking about issues like how do we assure independent reviews of use of force incidents, allegations of racially biased policing, what have you. And right now we refer those internal affairs reviews to the Davis Police Department to look at, or the Woodland Police Department to look at. But they do the same thing, and it's not real. It's not real independence. But could SACOG be a place for that to happen, as an example? But and there are relationships with the training system, like who becomes a police officer in the first place. A lot of that happens through the academies, but the academy doesn't care what West Sacramento thinks. The academy doesn't care what Winters thinks, but it might care if we were all together working on that issue. What are the standards? What are the recruitment protocols? How do we identify bad apples per se before they get into our departments? How can we collaborate in order to accomplish that? So I am absolutely ready to do the work and to collaborate with some partners old and new on this issue. But let's please focus on actions where we can make a difference, and where SACOG has something to add to this equation, and to support the work that is underway. And I watched Director Jennings and Director Chenier grappling with this, through every fiber of their body. We need to be, and we're all doing that, but not in the same level of intensity. Let's find ways to support that work and to identify those moments when the window opens, those actors, those change makers among us that are on the verge of making something happen with just a little bit more push, or maybe that one more data point, or maybe that one funding thing to help grease the wheel. But look for where we can really make a difference, and not think of ourselves as the anti-racist, center of the entire Sacramento region, because we're not. And pretending will only reduce our ability to be effective in that space. So again, thank you very much for bringing it up. I'm 100% committed to helping and to doing the work. And let's make sure that we're really contributing towards advancing real, tangible, life-changing progress in this domain before this window closes.
Thank you very much, Director Qualden. Appreciate those words very much. We have Director Zaragoza, and then I don't have any other hands raised. And I also just certainly, folks are certainly willing to give or able to give some additional, comments with regards to board. Well, first of all, we'll have some follow-up, certainly some next steps. But I want to just make sure. Oh, I see Director Saylor has his hand raised as well too now.
So, Lucas, how do I raise my hand? I can't find it anywhere on this thing.
Gotcha.
Assume that my hand is raised.
Yeah, I got it. Great. Yeah, thanks so much. I'm trying to toggle between the two screens. Thank you. So I'll stop for a second. And yeah, we've got Zaragoza, Saylor, and Joyner.
Thank you, Chair. and Vice Chair for your leadership on this issue. I think the Vice Chair said it well when he said, there's areas in our SACOG region that, it might be difficult to have these types of conversations. I can include mine as being one of those areas, but it's important to do, and it's the right thing for us to do, to stand up and be able to have that conversation and to look towards real action. And so I 100% want to be part of this working group as well, and to work with my partners across the region to come up with real solutions and things that we can be supportive of in other areas, like with Director Jennings and Director Shamir here in Sacramento. So count me in. I'll do whatever I can do, and look forward to the work going forward, as well as with staff too. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Director Saylor and then Director Joyner.
My comment is very brief. I appreciate all of the leadership that's been exhibited in this conversation thus far by the chair, vice chair, and I wanted to hear from my colleagues on the board. I'm 100% committed to the effort. I would be delighted to participate if there's a room for me at the table. So let's do this. I appreciate the topic. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Director Joyner.
Thank you, Lucas. I'll try to keep my comments brief as well. I was intentionally sitting back and listening. I'm the guy that sits around on whatever board he's on and says, how does this fit our mission? How is this what we were established to do? And as people were talking, I was still fairly unclear as to how it fit our mission, although I could fit it into the COG side of the organization. Director Cabalden, I think, perfectly and far more articulately covered my thoughts, and within the framework of those thoughts and those concerns, I am absolutely willing to engage and have the conversation. But I too, like all of us, we're all very, very busy. We're having these conversations in our communities. We're having them in our homes. If we're going to have this conversation at SACOG, I truly want it to be meaningful and in areas where we can make a difference. And so, Christopher, thank you for your thoughts. I could not have come up with it as well stated as you did. So count me in as well.
Great, thank you very much, Director Joyner. Appreciate that. Director Harris, you have your hand raised. And actually, before he speaks, I just want to also say that I have received a message as well from ex officio director, but Takar from Sue Takar from Caltrans, and Caltrans is interested in participating in this effort as well as in their ex officio role. And so I have Director Harris and Director Sander with their hands raised.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to throw my name in the hat for sure. As retired law enforcement from the California Highway Patrol, I think I can add some good perspective and information to the conversation. I think we can find ways to make our role at SACOG fit. Like Director Joyner, I often wonder that too. It might be a good cause, but where do we fit in our purposes right here? And I think we can find a way for it to work. It's an issue that I think the topic has been long overdue to address. It just unfortunately had to have tragedy take place in our country, another tragedy for it to get to this point. But I would be honored to be a part of it and work together with you professional individuals to come up with some solutions that we can apply SACOG and perhaps even beyond. So thank you very much.
Appreciate that very much. Director Sander.
Thank you, Lucas. I would also just commend my colleagues on their thoughtfulness and their comments. I'm also interested in participating. I don't want to go into resume stuff, but I have some roots on this issue. And in particular, I'm interested in just the work we were doing recently on commercial corridors, and as well as some of the poor neighborhoods in our region and those aging suburban regions that suffer so much economically, whose residents suffer so much because of lack of opportunity, and the burden I think we as a region bear because of that. and sort of the moral obligation we all have to do something about that lack of fairness in those communities. I would commend to the group some work of the National League of Cities. I've served on the board there, and I happened to be on the board when they started their REAL campaign, or I think it's task force is actually what they call it. And it's race, equity, and leadership. They have developed some materials that might be useful to us in thinking about this and how exactly it might apply to our mission and how we might go about tackling this sort of a challenge. So I'd be interested in being part of that process.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments and also your offer to participate. Just looking, don't see any other hands raised. So this is the last sort of, stay tuned in terms of next steps. I will actually, what I'll do is turn it over to James now. So actually, let me do this. Yeah. Are there any board members that have any sort of just general board reports, any quick items they want to give? And I assume that probably not much, but I will, otherwise I'm just going to turn over to James to sort of give his executive director's report, and then we'll be done for the day.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Chair Frericks. I was thinking, I was preparing some notes that would either have said, I want to hear from more board members on this topic, or something that might frame the questions about the role of SACOG and the importance of this and mission. But I think I can't imagine frankly, just a more eloquent set of what you all have just reported on. The discussion that you've just had, albeit virtual. I want to say, and Chair Frericks mentioned, we had a staff meeting on this on Tuesday. I'm very aware this is not a new issue, but it certainly is one, as we all know, has just has spilled into the national spotlight and onto the streets. So let me just say this. I think it's really interesting what Director Cabaldon was raising about, is there a COG function here that actually, in terms of supporting local efforts and doing something above and beyond? And I think that's really interesting. There is work that this agency undertakes all the time that can, I think, more intentionally reduce disparities, more intentionally reduce racial disparities. And we have so many reasons to do that, one of which, as I put in my update to all of you just 2 weeks ago, over and above the moral imperative is the simple economic imperative of a region that holds people back, a region that has the kinds of disparities that we have, in large part based on race, is not the region that's going to be successful economically. You can just ask Barry Broom for his opinion on this topic, and he will be more articulate than I can be. I want to say, I think we have, I believe that our work has big impacts to move the dial on equity, but we have not been explicit about that. And I take responsibility, and I take that with my staff. I think our staff, your staff, is excited to dig into these issues. Your staff wants us to be explicit and not sort of tiptoe around this issue. And I realize that may actually engender some very uncomfortable conversations, some debates. But what I hear is a board that is ready to take that on. Our staff wants permission, our staff wants support, our staff wants to help you understand the levers that you have as SACOG, the programs you have, the things that we do every day and every year. How can you bend those existing work programs and projects towards the arc of justice and equity and reducing racial disparities? And so I really appreciate the conversation. I hope you appreciate where I am coming from, and among the many things I just talked about and was thinking when I was listening to you all, which is this topic, I believe absolutely in your admonition around action. And we don't want to waste your time or come up with a set of vague principles. But if this region can get on the same page on this, on racial equity, you will find more power, I think, than you could ever imagine. So I hope that concludes my remarks with a note of optimism and gratefulness. And I want to say you have a staff who is excited to dig into this as well. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you, James, for that update. It really thoughtful. Appreciate that. Are there other folks that have any either questions, comments, discussion for comments for James at all? If not, the rest of the items on our agenda are receive and file, and we can get ready to adjourn the meeting. I will just say, again, in closing, thank you for this thoughtful discussion. This layered on top of the issues we've all been facing for months now with regard to the pandemic. We're seeing obviously a major increase in cases and such. So, certainly it's how it continues to weigh on our minds. It's going to weigh on our budgets, other things. But I mean, these issues that we are talking about today and going to work on, sort of facing and seeing how we can, move the ball forward for this organization. I just am very appreciative of folks, their comments and willingness to engage on these issues. It's very, very important work. So I've had a couple of folks who had to leave. Dr. Lozano is also interested in being part of this group if it's not too large. Let's see, yeah, I think that we will get ready to adjourn. I will say one last quick thing. The next SACOG board meeting is to be held. So we won't have, of course, a July board meeting. The next meeting is to be held Thursday, August 20th. And at this point, we are planning on holding the meeting via Zoom. Certainly things might change, but at this point, we plan on having at least another remote board meeting in August. And with that,
Lucas,
yes,
can I just share one last thought, please? As James was talking, I really want to, at least from my perspective, stress the importance of this working group coming together in the space that Christopher identified. If it starts to look as though it is advancing a particular political agenda, I don't know that we're going to be as successful as we could be otherwise. Christopher did a really great job of identifying a space where we can all come together and work to the best advantage of our communities. And that's where I want to focus.
Yeah. Yep. Understood. Appreciate that. Again, I mean, it's more of a one to raise the topic today, sort of have this discussion, and then, start to work on obviously some, more framework or details, filling in the blanks a bit. So thank you all for the discussion. If there aren't any other additional questions or comments today, we will stand adjourned until Thursday, August 20th. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day. Appreciate it. Stay healthy.
Thank you all.
Yeah.